The folks who lived along the far edge of the high plains often said trouble could rise from clear skies as fast as prairie wind, and that truth found Cowboy Reed on a warm evening when the sun hung low over the wide American frontier. He had spent most of the afternoon riding back toward his small cabin, guiding his chestnut horse through tall grass that swayed like waves. He planned to rest early, cook a simple meal, and let the quiet settle around him the way it always did. But fate in the Old West had a habit of stepping into a man's path without asking, and that evening it came in the form of a broken wagon sitting crooked at the bend of an old dirt trail. At first, Reed thought it belonged to one of the ranch families who traveled through the valley. But as he rode closer, he spotted a figure standing beside the wagon. Her stance held strength, the kind he recognized from warriors he had seen in the past, yet her shoulders carried a weight that made him look twice. She was an Apache woman, tall and steady, her long dark hair braided with careful skill. Her eyes sharp, like they could read the horizon better than any map. Reed slowed his horse as he approached, raising one hand to show he meant peace. He had lived long enough near Apache land to know respect kept a man alive. The woman, who called herself Lina, watched him without fear. Her wagon wheel lay cracked beneath the axle, the wood split from riding too heavy over stone. 2 baskets of herbs and woven blankets lay in the back, along with tools that looked passed down from elders. She had been trying to lift the side of the wagon alone, using a long branch as a lever, her palms marked with dirt. Reed saw the strain in her arms and stepped down before she asked for help. He moved slow, giving her time to decide if she wanted a stranger near her belongings. After a moment, she nodded once, and that was enough. Reed grabbed a rock to wedge beneath the frame, lifting it while she positioned the new piece of wood she had carved from a fallen branch. They worked without many words, only short exchanges like quiet sparks between them. He noticed how careful she was with every movement, how she tested each knot and checked each line of grain in the wood. She was skilled, but even skilled hands needed support at times. They finally secured the wheel well enough for her to travel. When they stepped back, Lina let out a breath that carried both relief and pride. She thanked him in a voice that held strength and grace at the same time. Reed didn't need reward or praise, but there was something about her calm courage that stayed with him. As the light faded, she explained that she was traveling back toward her band with medicine she had gathered. She spoke little about them, only saying her people camped near the mountains where the wind sang through the pines. Reed offered to ride with her for a short stretch, at least until she reached the fork where the land opened wide. She refused gently, saying she would be safe under the stars and that the spirits watched her path. Reed respected her choice, tipped his hat, and watched her wagon roll away into the deepening dusk. On the ride home, he kept replaying the image of her calm face and steady hands. Something about her felt like a story unfinished, something the land itself had whispered into his life. When he reached his cabin, the night had settled fully, the silence broken only by the distant call of an owl. His small home sat tucked between cottonwoods, with a creek running close enough to hear its steady flow. He tied his horse, lit a lantern, and stepped inside, trying to shake off the feeling that the world had shifted in a subtle way he couldn't name. He cooked a simple stew and sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the ridge. The thought of Lina traveling alone made him uneasy, yet he knew Apache women carried more strength than most men ever claimed for themselves. Still, he hoped the repaired wheel held all the way home. Before sleeping, he checked the latch on the door and the rope that held the horses in the corral, more out of instinct than fear. The valley was calm, and no trouble seemed near, but the Old West had a way of waiting until a man felt safe, before showing its teeth. The next morning, Reed woke before dawn to the smell of pine smoke drifting faintly through the air. It was strange, because he hadn't lit his own fire yet. He stepped onto his porch, letting the cool breeze brush against his skin. That was when he noticed the silence. No birds, no rustling of small animals, just stillness so heavy it felt like a warning. Reed reached for his rifle, not out of aggression but because the frontier taught him to stay ready. He took a slow step off his porch, scanning the tree line. The sunrise was just beginning to show, painting the sky in thin streaks of gold. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful, then his horse snorted and backed up as if sensing something he couldn't yet see. Reed froze. From behind the far cottonwoods came a low rumble, like distant thunder rolling across open land. He knew that sound, hoofbeats, not one or two, many, a whole line of horses approaching at a slow, deliberate pace. Reed steadied himself, feeling the ground vibrate under his boots. The riders emerged from the trees with faces painted in bold Apache war colors, each pattern carrying meaning older than the land Reed lived on. The riders moved in silence, circling with practiced precision. Their spears and bows glinted in the rising sun, and their horses snorted with deep, controlled breaths. Reed counted at least 20 riders. Maybe more. His cabin stood at the center of their forming ring, the circle tightening as they spread around him. Reed didn't raise his weapon. He knew better. One wrong move could turn a misunderstanding into a tragedy. He set his rifle on the porch rail and held his hands out slightly to show he meant no harm. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the dust from their horses drifted in the still morning air. Then one rider stepped forward, painted in strong red and black stripes, his expression unreadable. His eyes were sharp, watching Reed like a man measuring truth from lies. Reed didn't know if they had come because of Lina or because of something entirely different, but his instinct whispered that whatever danger had followed the Apache woman last, night had now arrived at his door. The riders tightened their circle. The leader's horse pawed the ground. Reed waited for the first word, knowing his next breath might decide everything, and that was when he saw another rider appear behind the others. Someone he recognized before her face was fully clear. It was Lina. She wasn't painted for war, but her expression held something fierce and urgent. Something that told Red the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. Lina rode forward with a slow, steady pull on her reins, her dark hair brushing across her shoulders as her horse stepped through the ring. The painted warriors parted for her, though none lowered their weapons. Their silence carried weight, like the air right before a storm breaks across the plains. Reed tried to read her eyes, searching for a sign that told him whether he was in danger or simply caught in something he didn't yet understand. Lina stopped only a few feet away, the morning sun catching on the small copper beads woven into the side of her braid. Reed kept his hands still, his breath controlled. He had seen Apache war parties before, though never this close and never circling him. Something powerful had stirred them, something that reached far beyond a broken wagon wheel. Lina looked at him, but her expression held a mix of urgency and worry that twisted deeper each second. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hostility. It was something heavier. "You helped me yesterday," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough strength to be heard by the men behind her. "And because of that, you must listen now." Reed nodded once. Every instinct told him to stay calm. The leader at her side, a tall warrior marked with black paint shaped like wings across his cheeks, narrowed his eyes. This man held authority. His posture, the way his horse responded to small motions, the quiet discipline in his breathing. Reed guessed this was Chief Talek, a name whispered across the plains with deep respect. Talek's gaze cut through a man's thoughts like a sharp knife. Reed stood still, meeting it with the steady calm he had learned from years. Alone on the frontier, Lina turned slightly toward Talek and spoke in Apache. Her voice steady, but Reed could sense tension threading through her words. The chief's jaw tightened. The other warriors watched Reed as if waiting for him to reveal something. Reed didn't understand the language, but he understood the tone. Lina was telling them something that mattered, something connected to her wagon, her journey. And maybe the reason they rode here painted for war. Finally, Talek raised one hand, and the riders eased their horses into a slower circle. Not relaxed, but less threatening. Reed dared to breathe a little deeper. Lina looked back at him. "When you fixed my wagon, I did not tell you all that I carried," she said. "I should have, but I thought it would not touch your life." Reed's heartbeat thumped against his ribs. "What did you carry?" Before she answered, Talek stepped forward, towering above Reed from his horse. "You touched the belongings of an Apache healer," he said in low English. His voice carried age and command. You touched what was meant only for her people. Reed felt confusion claw up inside him, but he held his ground. I only moved her wagon so the wheel could be set. I didn't take anything, Chief. Didn't mean disrespect. Talek studied him, then glanced at Lena again. She nodded, confirming Reed spoke the truth. The chief made no sign of softening, though. His riders watched silently, their horses shifting in place. Hoofs pressing into the dirt with slow, heavy thuds. Lena spoke again. I carry medicine gathered from my band, but that is not all. I also bring word of something missing, something my people lost. Her voice lowered. And when you helped me, some thought you might be tied to this loss. Reed's stomach tightened. Something went missing before I came along. Lina nodded once. Talek added, a sacred marking stone, taken from our cliffs 2 nights ago. Whoever stole it rode near where she traveled. Reed shook his head slowly. You think I took it? Talek didn't speak immediately. His silence was more unsettling than any accusation. Finally he said, we do not know who took it. We follow tracks, signs, and the one who helps must also answer. Reed could almost feel the noose of misunderstanding closing around him. He kept his voice even. I did nothing but lift a wagon and tighten some rope. You saw me come from the far edge of the plains, alone, no stolen stone on me. Lina shifted in her saddle. Chief Talek understands you may not be the thief. But the riders found tracks close to where we met. And those tracks led toward your side of the valley. Reed clenched his jaw. He had seen no strange riders yesterday, no shadow moving through the land. But the frontier was wide enough for a thief to slip past him without a whisper. He glanced at the riders surrounding him. Their faces were firm, unreadable, painted for serious purpose. This was no simple visit. Something sacred was at stake. Talek spoke again. The stone holds stories of our ancestors. If it disappears, our children lose the path of their fathers. This cannot be allowed. Reed didn't argue. He respected Apache ways too much to dismiss it. But he also knew his innocence meant nothing if suspicion outweighed truth. Lena's eyes softened. I told them what you did yesterday. Your help, your respect. That is why we came with talk first, not fire. Reed nodded, grateful she had spoken for him, though the tension in the air had not faded. Tell me what you need from me, he said. If someone used my trails or passed near my cabin, I want them found same as you. Talek studied him again. Reed didn't look away. After a long moment, the chief motioned for the riders to halt in place. The circle stopped moving. Dust settled slowly around them. We ride the valley again, Talek said. You will ride with us. Show where you traveled yesterday. Show what you saw. If the thief came through your land, you will help us track him. Reed hesitated only a second. Refusing wasn't an option? I'll ride. Talek gave a sharp nod. Lina's shoulders eased a little, as if she had hoped Reed would agree. But one rider on the far side of the circle frowned and muttered under his breath. Another shook his head slightly. Not all trusted Reed, the danger wasn't gone. It was just quiet for now, like a snake lying under a log. Reed turned to his cabin, grabbed his saddle and rifle, and began preparing his horse. As he worked, he felt the eyes of 20 painted warriors on his back. He tightened the cinch belt, checked the stirrups, and ran his hand once over the horse's neck to calm it. The animal sensed the tension, tossing its head lightly. Before mounting, Reed stepped inside his cabin to grab his canteen. As he did, he noticed something that hadn't been there yesterday. A small mark on the wooden floor near the back wall. A print, a boot print. Not shaped like Apache moccasins either. Someone had come near his home while he slept. Reed felt his heartbeat kick hard. He stepped outside, making sure none saw the surprise on his face. He would mention it later when the moment was right. Saying it too soon might make things worse. Talek might think he hid something. Or worse, that he was lying to save himself. Reed mounted his horse. Lina rode closer. The chief still doubts you, she whispered. But doubt is stronger when a man stays silent. If you see anything, speak it. Reed gave a slow nod. I'll speak when it's time. Talek raised his hand, calling the riders to move. They formed two lines, with Reed placed near the front where they could watch him clearly. The riders headed toward the valley, hooves pounding in steady rhythm. The air filled with dust and morning sun as they moved through tall grass. Reed glanced back once at his cabin. Something inside him tightened. Someone had been there. Someone bold enough to sneak close while he slept. Someone who wanted the blame to fall on him. As they rode deeper into Apache land, the sky stretched wide above them, filled with soaring hawks and drifting clouds. The tension between Reed and the riders hung heavy in the air. Every rustle of grass made him look twice. Every shadow felt like it hid answers he wasn't ready to face. Talek slowed his horse near the ridge and scanned the earth. Reed followed his gaze. There were faint tracks leading toward the river, not deep enough to mark direction clearly. But something about them felt familiar. Lena rode closer. "Do you know those tracks?" Reed swallowed hard. "I've seen boots like that before. In town. Someone passing through last week." Talek turned sharply. "Who?" Reed took a breath. "A man named Colden. Mean streak in him. Rode through fast. Looked like he carried more than he wanted folks to notice. He camped near my land one night." Talek's expression hardened. The riders murmured behind them. Reed continued, "If he took your stone, he's long gone now. But he knows these trails. He could be hiding anywhere." The chief stared at him, jaw set. "Then we find him." Reed nodded, though a heavy worry pressed into his chest. Colden was dangerous, cunning, and if he had stolen from the Apache, he wouldn't give up easy. The riders urged their horses forward, heading toward the rocky valley where tracks split into different paths. The wind picked up, carrying a warning through the grass. Reed felt it in his bones. This wasn't just a hunt. It was the beginning of a storm ready to break over all of them, and the man who started it was closer than anyone. Knew. The trail narrowed. As they moved deeper into the broken land where the valley split like an old scar, sagebrush scraped their boots. Loose rocks slid under hooves. The riders spread out in a long line, following Talek's raised hand. Reed rode near the front, with Lena just behind him, her gaze fixed on the ground as much as on the horizon. The morning sun had climbed higher, but the air held a sharp edge. Like the land itself knew something was wrong. They reached a place where the tracks faded into hard stone. The ground turned to pale slabs, cracked and uneven. Talek held up his arm again and brought the riders to a stop. Reed swung down from his horse, crouching to study what little sign remained at the edge of the rock. There, half hidden under a strip of dust, he saw it. A sharp heel mark. Not a moccasin. A boot like the ones sold in town. Same pattern, Reed said quietly. "This is him. This is Colden." Talek slid from his saddle with slow control. He walked over, studied the faint tracks, and then looked up at the rocky rise ahead. "He chose stone so our prints would break," the chief said. "He knows how to shake a trail." Reed nodded. "He's not just some drifter. He watches. Learns the land. Uses it against folks." Lina stepped closer, her eyes on the heel mark. For a moment, she looked less like the calm healer and more like a woman trying to hold steady while anger burned inside. "The stone he took is not just rock," she said. "It carries carvings from our elders. The story of when our people first came to these cliffs. Without it, the story is broken." Reed looked up at her. "Did he know what it was when he took it?" Talek answered. "Men like him may not understand our words, but they know gold when they see it. Not always gold in metal. Gold in what they can trade. There are buyers in towns who will pay for what belongs to our dead." Reed felt the old anger rise in him. He had seen that kind of trade before. Cabinets in back rooms lined with things taken from graves and sacred places. Sold to men who liked to tell stories over whiskey while they handled bones and carved stones they did not respect. He stood and brushed dust from his hands. Colden passed through town last week. Sat in the corner of the saloon watching everyone. Bought supplies like he was heading out for a long ride. I remember the way he kept one hand on his saddlebags. Wouldn't let them out of his sight. Lina's eyes narrowed. "You spoke to him?" Not more than needed, Reed said. But I saw enough. He asked the barkeep if Apache ever came to trade. He asked what they carried, what they valued. Too many questions for a stranger who claimed he was just passing by. One of the younger warriors, a sharp-eyed rider named Kalen, snorted under his breath. "And you did not warn anyone?" he said. The edge in his voice was clear. Reed met his gaze without anger. "Back then, I didn't know he would ride on your land. Men ask foolish things in saloons every day. Not all of them are thieves." Kalen's jaw clenched. Talek raised a hand, a small motion that kept the sharp words from turning into something worse. "Blame will not call back what is taken," the chief said. "We follow signs. We do not turn our blades on each other." Still, Reed could feel the weight of Kalen's distrust pressing against him like a cold wind. Talek looked at the rise of stone that stretched ahead. "The trail breaks here," he said. "But men on horses still need water. Colden must drink. He must rest. There are only so many places to do that." Lina nodded. "The river bend near Dead Juniper, or the hidden spring by the old cottonwood. Both are close to this path." Reed thought for a moment. "If he wants to sell that sacred stone, he will have to pass near town again. There is a trader there. Name is Vexler. Smiles too much. Pays money for things he should leave alone?" Talek's gaze rested on Reed's face. "You know much about the greed of your people. I've seen it ruin more than one life," Reed replied quietly. "Not just Apache lives. Ranchers, miners, cowhands. Greed doesn't choose sides. It just eats." The chief seemed to accept that. After a moment, he made a choice. "We split," he said. "Half follow the river, half cut toward the town. We watch the trader. We watch the roads. If this Colden thinks he can ride between two worlds, we will close both doors." He pointed to Reed. "You ride with Lena and 4 of my men to town. You know the streets and who to watch. Do not let your sheriff warn the thief. If the law there is blind, we will open its eyes." Reed felt the tension grow deeper. Bringing Apache warriors into a settlement was like walking into dry grass with a lantern. People in town did not forget old fear. Still, there was no turning back. "I'll take you by the side trail," Reed said. "Keeps you out of open sight for a while. But once we're close, folks will see you. They'll talk." "Let them talk," Talek said. "We are not ghosts in our own land." The group split. Talek led the larger half toward the river bend, while Reed, Lina, Kalen, and 3 other riders named Roran, Tekoa, and Silon turned southeast, following a narrow path that cut between low hills. The journey grew quiet as the land smoothed out. The tension rode with them like an unseen companion dot as they traveled. Reed's mind drifted back to the first time he had crossed paths with Apache people years ago. He had been a younger man then, riding with cattle near a canyon. A fight had almost started between his trail boss and an Apache band over grazing lines. Reed had watched as pride and anger pushed men toward something they did not really want. It had taken one older Apache man to step forward and lay a hand over his own heart, speaking calmly until both sides eased back. That man had been Talek. Reed had never forgotten the way the chief looked at him afterward, with a sort of quiet measure, like he was deciding whether this young cowboy understood anything at all about respect. Now, years later, that same chief had war paint on his riders and suspicion in his eyes. By midday, the sun beat down hard. They stopped under a cluster of scattered mesquite trees. Horses drank from a shallow ditch where water still clung to the shadows. Reed leaned against his saddle horn, watching Lena as she checked a leather pouch strapped to her side. "What are you carrying now?" he asked. She glanced at him. "Herbs for fever. A small piece of my mother's beads. And a promise I made." "Promise to who?" "To my grandfather," she said. "He was keeper of the sacred stone before Talek. He told me that if anything ever happened to it, I must stand at the front of our people, not the back. Even if that meant riding into places where I am not welcomed." Reed studied her face. "Town is not kind to Apache women. Some men there barely know kindness for their own wives." Lina's jaw tightened. "Fear makes people forget their own hearts." My people have seen that for a long time. But I will not stand aside while a thief carries our history like a trinket. Near them, Kalen pretended to check his horse's reins, but Reed could tell the young warrior was listening. When Lena finished, Kalen stepped closer. If trouble starts in town, Kalen said to Reed, do not ask us to hide our strength. It isn't hiding, Reed answered. It's choosing your moment. If you walk into the main street with bows drawn, some fool with a shaking gun will fire before he knows what he's doing. Then blood spills. No one wants that. Kalen's eyes flashed. Our blood has spilled on this land longer than your cabins have stood. Lina reached out and touched his arm. We know that, brother. But the chief sent us with Reed for a reason. Not to bring fire, but to bring answers. Let him guide us through the town. For now. Kalen held her gaze, then gave a short nod, his pride folding back just enough. They rode on. By late afternoon, the outline of the town came into view. Low buildings. A church spire. A crooked line of telegraph poles like thin, tired trees. Reed led them off the main road, guiding them behind a ridge covered with scrub. From there, they could look down without being seen. There, Reed said, pointing. Vexler's place. Back of the general store. He keeps his trade room in that side building. Folks pretend not to see what he buys. They watched for a long time. A wagon rolled by. Children ran chasing a loose dog. A rancher tied his horse outside the saloon. Nothing unusual. But then Reed's eyes narrowed. At the far edge of town, a single rider appeared, coming in slow from the north. Dust clung to his clothes. A rifle lay tied to his saddle. His hat brim was pulled low, but Reed recognized the stiff way he held his shoulders. That's him, Reed said. That's Colden. Lina leaned forward in her saddle. Kalen's hand drifted toward the bow at his side. Their horses shifted. Sensing the sudden rush of energy, Colden rode straight toward the back of Vexler's building. Reed's throat went dry. He's not even trying to hide it. Silon frowned. He thinks no one will stand against him. Reed's mind raced. If they stormed down now, the whole town would panic. Shots would ring out. Vexler would deny everything. Colden might slip away in the chaos. But if they waited too long, the sacred stone could change hands and vanish for good. Lena looked at Reed. What do we do? Reed watched as Colden dismounted and knocked on Vexler's side door. The trader opened it, glanced around, then stepped aside to let him in. Reed could almost feel Talik's unseen gaze from the river, trusting them to act wisely here. He swallowed hard. We go down, Reed said. But we do it my way. Quiet at first. Steel before fire. Kalen did not like it, Reed could see that. But Lena placed herself between them, her presence steady like a bridge over deep water. They turned their horses toward the narrow draw that would bring them around the back of the town, close to Vexler's building. The sky above was turning the faint color of evening, shadows beginning to stretch long. As they started down. Reed felt the knot in his chest pull tighter, somewhere inside that side room. An outlaw who hated Apache and a trader who loved profit were standing over a stolen sacred stone, somewhere, on the far side of the valley. Chief Talik and his riders watched the river trails, unaware of how close the thief already was to slipping out of their grasp. And between both worlds, a cowboy and an Apache woman were riding into a town that could turn on them with a single frightened shout the closer they came. The clearer Reed heard his own heartbeat. Timing itself with each step of his horse, the front doors of the saloon swung open in the distance. Voices carried on the cooling wind, and just as they reached the edge of the last building, Reed saw Vexler's side door open again and a flash of carved stone catch the light in Colden's hand. Reed froze as that glint of carved stone flashed in Colden's hand. It was only for a heartbeat, but it was long enough that Reed knew without doubt the outlaw still carried the sacred Apache carving. Vexler shut the side door behind them, leaving the two men inside with whatever deal they planned to complete. Lina's breath caught softly, and even the wind seemed to stop moving through the alley. Reed raised one hand, signaling the Apache riders behind him to stay back. Voices drifted faintly from the saloon, the clang of a tin cup. a dog barking near the blacksmith's shop. But here behind the buildings, everything felt too narrow and too tense. Like the land itself knew something was about to snap. Reed studied the small side window of Vexler's trade room, where a strip of light shone through. He could make out the shadows of two men moving inside. Colden paced with sharp steps while Vexler leaned near a table, probably counting whatever coins he planned to trade for the stolen piece. Lena edged her horse closer to Reed. "They're going to exchange it," she whispered. "If Vexler gets that stone, he can pass it on to anyone. Talek may never find it again." Reed nodded. "We can't wait, but we can't barge in either. Folks around here scare easy. If they see Apache warriors closing in on a building, they'll run for guns first and senses later." Kalen, tense and bristling with impatience, whispered sharply, "Then what do you expect us to do? Watch while they pass our history from one thief to another?" Reed met his eyes. "I expect you to let me walk through that door first, because Vexler might listen to a local face before he panics." And Colden ... "Well, he knows me enough to hesitate before pulling iron." Tikoa frowned. "Hesitate does not mean stop." "No," Reed answered, "but hesitation can buy time. And time is all we need to turn this." Lina studied him quietly, her gaze steady. "You will not face them alone. If anything goes wrong, we will be there." Reed nodded with gratitude. He didn't speak aloud. He stepped down from his horse, adjusted his hat, and took a slow breath. The dusty ground felt unsteady under his boots as he made his way around the corner of the building. He kept his steps calm and casual, like he was just another man walking through the town on a long afternoon. He approached the side door and let his knuckles tap lightly against the wood. Inside, the movement stopped. Vexler's voice called out, sharp and uneasy. "Who's there?" Reed answered, steady and plain. "Just Reed, passing by. Thought I saw Colden's horse." A murmur followed. Colden's tone came next, low and irritated. "He's trouble. Don't open that door." Before Vexler could react, Reed spoke again, leaning a little closer to the door. "Just want a word. Something important. Won't take long." The lock slid. The door cracked open. Vexler's narrow face peeked through, his eyes twitchy from nerves. "Reed. Now's a bad time." Reed saw over his shoulder. Colden stood with his arms crossed, hat pushed back slightly, jaw tight. The stone lay on the table between them, faint carvings lit by the lantern above. Reed kept his hands relaxed at his sides. "I heard talk you were buying something special," Reed said softly. "Wanted to make sure you knew what you're getting into. That stone's not trinket trade. It's Apache sacred ground. If you keep it, they'll come looking. All of them." Vexler's eyes darted nervously. "I'm not buying anything. Colden just stopped by. Friendly talk." Colden snorted. "Friendly talk my foot. Reed, get lost. This ain't your business." Reed held his calm. He stepped 1 foot forward, letting the door open wider. "It's my business if trouble lands on my land," he said. "And right now it's already circling." As if his words summoned the moment, a soft rustle came from the alley behind him. Colden stiffened, eyes narrowing. He moved toward the table to grab the stone. Reed reacted. "Hold on," he said, raising his voice slightly. "You're in a tight spot, Colden. That stone doesn't belong to you. If you hand it over now, we can still walk out of this without harm." Colden barked a harsh laugh. "I don't hand over anything I ride for. Apache want it, they can come fight for it." Reed's jaw tightened. Colden was wrong about many things, but he wasn't wrong about that part. Apache would fight. And a fight in town would tear every street apart. Vexler lowered his voice. "Reed, if you're bringing trouble here, I want no part of it." "You brought trouble by opening that door," Reed said quietly. Inside the room, Colden grabbed the carved stone and shoved it into his saddlebag. "I'm done talking," he said. "Step aside." Reed stood firm. "If you walk out holding that stone, you won't make it past the well." "They're here, Colden." "Apache riders. And they want that piece back more than you want whatever money Vexler is offering?" Colden's eyes ignited with anger. He reached for his gun. Reed tensed, ready to move, but before Colden could pull the iron from his holster, the back door burst inward with a heavy kick. Kalen had moved too soon. The young Apache warrior stepped inside, bow in hand, eyes blazing with fury. "Give it back," Kalen said, voice shaking with barely controlled fire. Chaos erupted instantly. Vexler shrieked and stumbled backward, knocking over a crate of pottery. Colden swung his gun toward Kalen. Lena and the others charged through the side door behind Reed before he could shout for caution. Reed lunged forward, grabbing Colden's arm just as the outlaw fired. The gunshot tore through the ceiling, shaking plaster dust loose in a cloud. Colden shoved Reed back with surprising strength and hurled the table aside. The sacred stone rattled inside his saddlebag as he scrambled for the back door. Kalen followed, but Reed reached out and caught his arm. "Not here," Reed warned sharply. "Not in the open street." But the fight had moved faster than words could catch it. Colden sprinted out into the alley behind the building, using crates and barrels as cover. Tekoa and Silan charged after him while Reed and Lena bolted out the front. Townsfolk had already started looking out their windows, drawn by the gunshot. Some ran inside to hide. Others reached for rifles without knowing what they were shooting at. Reed's boots pounded against the ground as he ran around the corner. Colden mounted his horse with a quick leap and kicked hard, sending the animal into a fast gallop straight toward the north road. Tekoa shouted to the others, pointing as the thief sped toward the open plains. Lina mounted her horse in one smooth movement. Reed did the same. Kalen was already ahead of them, fury pushing him forward with wild speed. The riders thundered out of the alley, hooves striking sparks against loose stone. Dust filled the air as they followed Colden toward the ridge. Reed yelled, "Don't kill him! We need that stone alive." Kalen didn't answer. The wind swallowed his silence. They reached the open stretch beyond the last house of the town, where the land sloped upward toward the windy ridge. Colden urged his horse up the slope, pushing the animal hard. Reed knew that if Colden reached the narrow canyon trail at the top, he could vanish into a maze of cliffs and broken rock that stretched for miles. "Faster!" Reed urged his horse. The animal responded, muscles surging beneath him. Lena kept pace beside him, determination set deep in her face. Tekoa and Silan followed, while Kalen surged far ahead, closing in on Colden with every stride. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ridge. Colden's horse was fast, but fear made him ride reckless, his path wild and uneven. As he neared the canyon entrance, the stone he carried thumped loudly in his saddlebag, like the echo of something ancient calling out across the land. Kalen rode up close behind him. Reed shouted for caution, but Kalen did not slow. He reached forward, grabbing at Colden's saddle. Colden swung his arm, striking Kalen hard with the butt of his gun. Kalen lost balance but recovered quickly. The two riders clashed, fighting for control as their horses galloped dangerously close to the canyon's drop. Reed pushed harder, yelling, "Pull back." Kalen, not on the edge. But the wind drowned his voice. Suddenly, Colden jerked his reins and cut sharply into the narrow canyon path. His horse skidded, hooves slipping on loose shale. Dust shot upward in a thick cloud. Kalen followed, riding in after him with fierce momentum. Reed and the others reached the entrance seconds later. The canyon was wide enough for only one rider at a time. Jagged rock walls rose high on either side, creating a funnel that magnified every sound and shadow. Colden's horse thundered ahead with Kalen close behind. Both riders swallowed by the twisting trail. Reed stopped at the entrance, heart pounding. He knew this canyon, knew its forks and dead ends, knew how echo played tricks on a man's senses. If they lost sight of Colden now, it would take hours, maybe longer, to find him again. Lena rode up beside him. "We have to go in." Reed nodded, tightening the reins. "Stay close, and don't trust the shadows." They charged into the canyon. Every hoofbeat echoed like thunder between the walls. The path twisted sharply left, then right, then dropped down a narrow descent that forced the horses to pick their steps carefully. Dust hung in the air. Stirred by the two riders ahead, Reed saw the faint blur of Colden's horse making a sharp turn up ahead. He and Lena followed, But the canyon forked into two paths within a few steps. One bent toward open cliffs. The other curved deeper into shadow. Reed pulled hard on the reins. "Kalen went straight," he said, "but Colden went right," Lina answered quickly, pointing at the faint dust drifting into the shadowed bend. Reed's heart twisted. Kalen, driven by rage, had chased the outlaw into a path that didn't match. Colden's tracks, they were splitting apart, and in a canyon full of blind corners and falling stone. One wrong turn could cost all of them everything. Reed narrowed his eyes, scanning both paths, the dust trails, the shifting echoes. Then he made his choice, driving his horse forward toward the deeper shadows. Somewhere ahead, the outlaw clutched a sacred stone that could shatter peace across the land, and somewhere close behind, a young Apache warrior was riding into a trap he had no chance of seeing. Reed guided his horse into the darker bend of the canyon, trusting his instincts more than the echoing sounds around him. The air felt cooler here, heavy with dust shaken loose by Colden's frantic ride. Lina stayed close behind him, her horse's hooves falling in perfect rhythm with his. The walls rose on both sides, towering like the ribs of some ancient beast, their shadows stretching long across the narrow trail. Reed kept his eyes forward, searching for movement. Somewhere deeper inside, Colden was trying to outrun the truth he had stolen. They rounded another sharp turn, and finally Reed saw a flicker of motion ahead. Colden's horse slipped for a moment on the loose stones before the outlaw yanked it back under control. Colden glanced over his shoulder, eyes wide, breath ragged. The canyon forced him to slow. There was no room for reckless speed now. Reed urged his horse forward, closing the distance with careful control. Lina followed, steady and determined. Colden cursed loudly, the sound bouncing against the stone. "You're not getting this back," he shouted. "I rode hard for it." Reed didn't raise his voice. "You rode hard for trouble. And you're out of road." Colden pulled a small pistol from inside his coat, aiming it behind him. Reed ducked low on instinct, but before Colden could fire, the canyon wall shifted with a sudden groan. A rock slid free from high above and crashed between them, forcing Colden's horse to rear and stumble sideways. Reed pulled his horse to a stop, dust swirling in thick clouds around them. Lina pointed suddenly. He dropped the bag. The jolt had loosened Colden's saddlebag. It slid down the canyon slope, landing against a small ledge of rock. Colden swore and scrambled down after it, but the loose ground betrayed him. His boots slipped, and he had to brace himself with both hands to keep from falling. Reed rode closer, stopping just a few paces behind. Colden looked up at him, chest heaving, the stubborn fire of desperation burning in his eyes. "Don't take one more step," Colden warned. Reed stayed on his horse but leaned forward slightly. "You can't win, Colden. Talek rides the valley. Kalen's somewhere in these canyons. And every breath you take pulls you deeper into a place you can't escape." Colden let out a trembling breath. His arms shook from trying to balance on the rocky ledge. "I just wanted enough money to leave this land behind. Start fresh somewhere else?" "That stone won't give you a fresh start," Reed said quietly. "It'll bring more pain than you ever wanted." Colden hesitated. Then the rock under him shifted again. He slipped, sliding a short distance before grabbing a branch of dried brush. The saddlebag tumbled farther down the slope, landing safely near Reed's horse. Lina dismounted quickly and grabbed the bag, checking inside. Relief washed through her face. The sacred Apache stone lay safely within, its carvings glowing faintly where sunlight touched it. Colden saw, and something inside him finally broke. His shoulders sagged under the weight of defeat. "I can't climb back up," he muttered, voice hollow. Reed extended his hand downward. "I'll pull you up." Colden blinked hard. "Why help me? I caused all this." "Because ending this with more blood helps no one," Reed said. "Not you. Not Apache. Not me." For a moment, Colden looked like a man standing between two roads, unsure which one could still carry him. Then he reached up. Reed grabbed his wrist, bracing himself as he pulled the outlaw up inch by inch until Colden stood safely on level ground again. Colden's breath shook, but there was no fight left in him. Lina stepped forward, holding the recovered saddlebag close. Talek will decide your fate, she said, but her tone carried no anger. Only truth, Colden nodded weakly. I'll face him. With the canyon quiet around them, Reed placed Colden on Reed's own horse while Lena mounted hers. They rode slowly back toward the open ridge, where the light spilled across the valley like a warm welcome. As they approached the canyon entrance, Reed heard the cry of a hawk overhead. It was a comforting sound, a sign that the land was settling again after the storm of trouble Colden had stirred. They found Kalen waiting near the fork, bruised but standing, his horse calm beside him. He had realized he'd taken the wrong path and doubled back. His jaw tightened as he saw Colden alive, but when Lena held up the sacred stone, Kalen's anger softened into fierce relief. Reed guided their small group out of the canyon, where the rest of Talek's riders soon met them, riding strong and fast across the plains. Talek himself led the group, his face carved with lines of worry that lifted only when he saw Lena holding the stone. The chief dismounted and walked toward her with slow, powerful steps. She placed the stone in his hands, her expression steady. It is safe, she said. Thanks to help from Reed. Talek looked at Reed with the deep, measuring silence Reed had known years before. You rode with courage, Talek said. And you chose peace when anger was near. That is not a small thing. Reed nodded. Your stone belongs where it came from. Talek placed a hand over the carvings. It holds the memory of our people. And now it also holds the memory of how a cowboy stood beside us. The riders brought Colden forward. He didn't resist. Talek studied him for a long moment. You chose a path that broke our peace, the chief said. But you also faced the truth before a blade was drawn. That will guide our judgment. Colden lowered his head. I'm ready. Talek nodded to two of his men, who took Colden toward their horses. It wasn't cruelty. It was justice shaped by wisdom instead of rage. The tension that had gripped the land for days slowly released. Like a long-held breath finally let go? Lina turned toward Reed. You did more than fix a wagon, she said gently. You fixed the path between our worlds today. Reed felt warmth settle in his chest. You trusted me when you didn't have to. That counts for something. A faint smile touched Lina's lips. It counts for much. They rode back toward the open valley where Reed's cabin stood waiting under the cottonwoods. The sun lowered behind the mountains, washing the plains in gold. Talek and his riders prepared to head back toward their camp, the sacred stone resting safely among them again. Before leaving, Talek turned toward Reed. You helped one of ours on the road. Then you helped all of us with your heart. Our paths will cross again, cowboy. Reed tipped his hat. You'll always be welcome near my cabin. Kalen stepped forward next, no longer fueled by suspicion but by quiet respect. You fought beside us. That is not forgotten. Reed nodded to him. And you fought strong. Walk safe. When the warriors began their journey back to the mountains, Lena lingered a moment longer. She stepped closer to Reed, her gaze warm, filled with something deeper than simple thanks. When I first saw you on the trail, she said softly, I did not know your kindness would carry this far. Reed smiled slightly. Kindness can travel a long way on these plains. She touched his hand lightly, her fingers warm against his skin. The land remembers good men, she said. And so do I. Reed felt a quiet peace settle inside him as he watched her ride away with her people, the sacred stone safe once again. The valley seemed wider now, calmer, as if the earth itself approved of how things had ended. His horse grazed nearby, tail flicking lazily. The tension of the past days finally eased from both of them. Reed walked toward his cabin, listening to the soft sound of wind moving through the cottonwoods. He paused on the porch, taking in the peaceful sight of the plains stretching far into the softening dusk. Trouble had come to his home, but it had left without taking anything from him. Instead, it had given him something he didn't expect, a bond with a proud people, a reminder that courage didn't always mean fighting and the quiet hope that one day he would see Lina again on a trail where the wind carried only peace. The door to his cabin creaked open. Reed stepped inside, feeling the warmth of the fading day settle around him. He set his hat down, grateful for the simple safety of home. The prairie outside glowed under the final touch of sunlight, and for the first time in days, Reed let himself breathe easy. The land was calm again, and somewhere beyond the horizon, a healer with strong hands and steady eyes carried a piece of his story with her. Just as he carried a piece of hers. It was a good ending to a long journey, and the beginning of another he hoped would come.